Hi everyone, it is absolutely baking hot in the UK today. So it's 42 degrees. My wife actually just texted me the latest temperature. You know, it's baking hot, we don't have the aircon, the ice lollies are sold out, everyone's running for the paddling pool. I can literally hear the ice cream band right now as I'm making this, just as I hit record, so that's just teasing me right now. I've got these lights in front of me here with the heat, the computer, everything like that. But I love these chess videos, I'm bringing you a daily one. Do hit that like button if you enjoy them, show me some love in the comments, hit subscribe if you haven't done so already, never miss a future video. And in this one here, I've got a great game for you. It's the man of the moment, D Gukesh. Now he just broke 2700. He's only, 16 years old? Yeah, 16, just turned 16 years old. He's just behind Wei Yi and Alireza Firouzja, although someone pointed out to me he stopped playing a lot of classical chess during the pandemic, you know, for about a year or something. So he probably would have beaten Alireza to 2700 if he hadn't have stopped playing, maybe even Wei Yi, who knows. Such an incredibly talented kid. Now let's see this game. So he's playing black here. He's playing Abdusattorov, the world rapid champion, of course. Another very talented youngster from Uzbekistan. And here we go, e4 from Abdusattorov. So we get a Sicilian on the board and we go down this really topical line of the Sveshnikov variation. And this was really popularised by Magnus Carlsen in the 2018 World Championship match that he played against Fabiano Caruana. So knight f6 played, knight c3, and Magnus kind of revived this whole line. So you kick the knight, you create this hole here, then d6 played, you know, stops the knight from jumping in here. You can actually let the knight do that. It's called the Lowenthal variation. I faced it recently against a club player. Very interesting one. You let them have the dark squared bishop. That's another story. And now here the topical move is knight d5. So bishop g5 is the main approach, has been for decades. Very positional. You chop the knights, you gain access to the d5 square. But instead the knight comes here immediately. Now you can't be taking here. There's this check on c7, of course. So instead the knight was captured, pawn recaptures, and knight b8 under developing here. But the key thing is that you want to bring it on a new journey, you know, around here, sometimes to f6, but actually often into the e5 square if possible, if you can get f5, e4 going, that sort of thing. And this is really the theme of the game. So a4 from white, and you get both players chucking pawns on the opposite flanks of the board. So bishop e7 developing, bishop e2, castles, castles, and now pawn f5 immediately. And I just want to show you one game here that Carlsen played against Fabiano Caruana. So in that one, Carlsen went knight to d7, and we had bishop d2 from Fabi. And one of the reasons I want to show this game is that Fabi, after f5, he then goes a5 immediately. We had a6, the knight hopped back here, now e4 from Magnus, knight c4, and I'll probably stop it here for the moment. But the point being, Fabi delays these pawns actually getting pushed, and he brings the knight immediately into the game. And long term, you know, we get something like this. The knight hits b6, then he gets f4 in. Magnus doesn't want to live with that pawn, chops here. And okay, white gets some more space. The knight looks better, gets those pawns going eventually. Now, of course, the game was a draw, as was every game in that World Championship match. They actually drew 12 games. Then it went to the Rapids and Magnus won. But the reason I'm showing this is because this seems a better way to play to me. In this game here, if we run it back here, f5 was played immediately by Gukesh, and now b4 was played. And it's quite ambitious because it allows black to go a6, kick the knight, and then kick on with f4. So white's now never getting this f4 break in this game. Now sometimes that can be okay to keep f3, especially if the knight ever came back here and can come to e4. But in this structure, black's just actually a lot faster now. So a5 was played, bishop f5 developing, pawn c4, so it's a really aggressive setup. But the challenge for white is that you can't actually break with either one of these moves yet. And if you can't break with those pawns, where is the knight going? It has to reroute. And so after knight d7, we now have knight b1 played. So it's a kind of miserable underdevelopment, and already actually black is just better in this position. You know, look at these dangerous passed pawns. So bishop f6 was played, eyeing up against this rook. Bishop g4 came, didn't actually move the rook yet. because the rook can slide up here. If e4 comes, this is what we see. And this is a positional idea here. You want the knight to land on e4 if possible, hence eliminating the light squared bishop first. This is one of black's best pieces. This is the bad bishop stuck behind its pawn. So the bishop took, queen took, pawn e4. So the rook is attacked, slides up the board, bishop e5 covers here, and now knight d2 comes back into the game. If you go f3, by the way, I've not analysed all the lines here, but the queen's just getting completely trapped out of the game, so you can't do that. So knight d2 played, but now this is what probably was underestimated from a distance by Abdusattorov. We had knight f6 hitting the queen, queen e2 hits the pawn twice, but pawn f3 from Gukesh. Really beautiful pawn sacrifice, ripping open the king. In fact, it's a double pawn sack here, and you can't ignore it. I mean, say you go queen to d1 or something, you know, I was clicking around. You can actually sack a bishop here. King takes, knight g4 check. Now, there's tons of lines, but one of them is this. After king g3, there's this amazing knight to e3 move, forking both of these pieces, but opening the queen to join. There's pawn takes here. I mean, say you captured that one with the pawn, for example, well, you can check, and then you're coming in here. It's just awful. You know, you've opened up this one. I won't go through all the lines, but you're completely ripping everything open. So taking this one's forced. This is what Abdusattorov did. And now knight h5, this is the big idea. Black wants access to all of those dark squares here. So the knight now took on e4, the queen activated here, threatening mate in 1, so the knight hopped back to defend, and now black brings the final piece into the attack. So for 2 pawns, you know, there's a raging attack here, very, very daring play. Rook d1 was now played, giving the king some room, and now bishop f4. And in this position here, by the way, the computer wants to go through some drawing lines, start exchanging pieces, try and get some perpetual checks going. It doesn't love bishop f4. Where are we? This position here. Now it gives white a slight advantage, but this is the way to play for a win, which is what Gukesh did. So now bishop e3 played. The rook came to f6, trying to lift into the game. It wants to come here. Rook d4 pressured this bishop, but now rook h6 just ignores that pressure for the moment. You can't yet actually win a piece, and that's why queen d2 was played, breaks this pin, further attacks the bishop, and now g5. Now, if you try and break through straight away like this, the problem is this pawn can take. You cover this one here with the queen, then there's pins here. It's just horrible. Black's actually losing that position. So that's why instead g5 was played, holds that bishop for the moment. Rook e4 from Abdusattorov. Those ones were chopped off, gets rid of one of black's attacking pieces, also undoubles the pawns, but the pressure remains here because after the knight hops back, it's really not easy to defend this pawn. You know, if you start doing this, where you could be taking here. So that's why instead the pawn was just chucked. King f1 was played, allowing takes here, pawn recaptures, and queen takes on e4. So black's got one of those pawns back. And again, you don't have time to actually start chopping here, hit lots of pieces, because then we check down here, king e2, the rook invades, you're picking up the queen, none of it's any good. This is really the problem now for white, is that the king is more exposed in this position. So king g1 comes back. Now we had knight g4, hits bishop, hits pawn, very annoying square. Queen d3 was played, trying to trade them off, and now queen e5 ducked back, and there's only one drawing move in this position, which is crazy to find, and even if you find it, then there's some other only moves. But it's bishop to d2 here, just trying to hold the tension. But you're giving a pawn when you play like this. You know, black can take here, but then the idea is you activate down here. The queen actually has to come back here, or e8 you could go to as well, but you have to give ground. Then queen d4 threatens the attack. Pawn h5 gives space. Even now, if you check and drive the king up, it's not best for white actually. You give black a bit of advantage. Rook a1 is apparently the best move. You know, kind of a crazy position and just an impossible defensive task for white. So queen d4 was tried, but now queen f5, you know, lots of invasion squares looking to come in. So this one covered, tried to trade the queens again. We had a bit of back and forth, back to f5, queen d3, but now this is where Gukesh takes on e3 here. And you don't have time to get the queens off, then we're just a knight up. So here the queen recaptured on e3, and now black can start checking, get the invasion going. So king g2, queen c2 check. Now the king moved back to the back rank, and you want to invade with this rook if possible, but you have to be careful of this stuff. You know, this is leading to a perpetual, so that's why the rook checked from f6 first. The king moved away, the queen checked here, king d2, and again you just have to be so careful as black, because if you take here with check, this is actually leading to a draw after queen c3, because you counter attack on the rook, it's forcing the queens off essentially, and then the rook endgame should be drawn. So that's why the queens didn't come off here. We didn't have queen b4 check, instead king f8, preempting this takes here, also no invasion by the queen there. Now king c3, and now this is a classy way to play. Rook f1 threatens to invade, that's why you don't actually have time to take here, there's too many problems with your king, and so queen e2 covered this second rank, but then pawn g4, really classy move, doesn't try and check the king yet, just threatens this rook f3 check move, and it stops white from actually reconnecting the pieces, because if you go rook a2, you can check here, king moves, and then take on b4, and there's still just a ton of problems. You know, you can start checking here or here, and white's not long for this world or losing material. So that's why the king came to d4 here, but still it's no good. The hunt is on. We had rook d1 check, king c3, and now queen c1 check was actually the final move of the game. I mean, you're about to lose your rook here, so if you block with the queen, well, we take the rook with check. If instead you come back with the king here, well, then we can go rook d2, you pick up a tempo on the queen, and you're also threatening to mate, mate on c2, so you stop the king running away here, and again, the best move is just giving up the queen, completely over. If you want to see another amazing Gukesh game, click here. Thanks for watching, see you soon.